Hey, thank you guys for listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. I'm one of the hosts here, and on this episode we are talking about the 2009 independent French movie Cold Souls starring Paul Giamatti. I hope you guys enjoy this.
Much like last year's Oklahoma and this year's Showgirls 2, Pennies from Heaven, this is the episode of Victims and Villains that not a whole lot of people asked for or probably will listen to. And this episode, we're talking about the 2009 dramedy Cold Souls, which you guys can stream right now on Hoopla and Canopy if you guys have a library card. If not, you guys can rent it on any major digital service, wherever you guys get your movies from. But I am joined by Dan the Movie Man Rockwood.
Yeah, on no one asking for this episode, I don't remember agreeing to do this episode. You chatted me one day and said, hey, I got you confirmed for Cold Souls. I was like, cool, what's that? And you were like, you agreed. I don't remember that conversation happening, but in fairness, you asked me to do a lot of things, and I just kind of say yes to most of it. So, but I'm happy I'm here, and I'm happy I checked out this film. But man, what a weird movie this was.
And speaking of weird, the last time we brought this gentleman on was to talk about Hellraiser. He is the director behind the movie What Lies Below, which you guys can watch right now on Netflix. If you guys have an account, it is Mr. Braden-Duemmeler. What is up, my man?
What's up, guys? I'm so happy to be here. Had a fun time watching Cold Souls, so I would have never been turned on to it had you not suggested it. So I'm excited to talk about it.
So Cold Souls is such an interesting movie to talk about because it has like so much like philosophical themes in it. And I feel like it was bred for our show, but I feel like it's under so many people's radars for a number of different reasons. First off being this movie is an indie movie, and a lot of times indie movies kind of fly under the radar. I'm pretty sure that had I not turned either one of you guys onto this movie, neither one of you guys would have seen it. I discovered it last year in a search for Being John Malkovich. This movie's kind of like got that Being John Malkovich vibe to it. And also, too, I think that Paul Giamatti's probably not a big notable star to some other like stars that you probably know, like Brad Pitt. Just to name like Robert Redford or, Jennifer Lopez, or just kind of going through Woody Harrelson or just a number of other people. Like Paul Giamatti, I feel like doesn't kind of get brought up into conversation a whole lot. So I feel like he flies under a lot of people's radar. But Dan, tell us what Cold Souls is even about so we can kind of give people a little bit of an illustration.
Wow, yeah, so keep in mind, I had never heard of this movie before, so I sat down to watch it not knowing anything about it, which just made it for that much more of a bizarre ride. But the elevator pitch for this film, so Paul Giamatti is an actor who is trying to get into this role. He's doing a Chekhov play, and he feels that there is either something missing in his life or he's not able to quite get into the character as well as he would like, and he realizes that his soul is weighing him down. So he, through somewhat accidental means, discovers this service, this cold soul storage service. And they extract the soul and store it for you so you don't have to deal with the weight of carrying it around. Keep in mind, I thought this was a figurative, hypothetical thing of we're going to do some therapy sessions and we will figuratively take your soul and you don't need to worry about carrying it around anymore. No, they literally put him into a tube, and his soul is extracted from his body, and then things just get more confusing from there. And it turns out you can trade souls with people and have a soul that is not your own if you want to try out someone who is in a different line of work or something like that. So that is the setup for the film. This came out in 2009, I believe, and is just super, super strange, but really cool, and I definitely dug it. It was not a plot that I was expecting going into it, so that was a nice surprise.
So for me, I was just really kind of having a rough day at work, and I was on Hoopla looking for something to watch, and was trying to pitch my wife on a comedy. And I had kind of like narrowed it down between this and another movie. And I really was intrigued by this because, much like Braden, I really love Paul Giamatti as an actor. I think that he's definitely underappreciated from time to time. But I really wanted to see what this movie is about. We got like probably like a quarter way through this movie. And my wife just kind of like looks at me and she says, "When does this start getting funny?" And she was just not feeling this. And then lo and behold, a couple of minutes later comes the dinner scene, and I love this scene in particular because this woman is being consulted by Paul and his wife and a couple of their friends, and she's talking about not knowing what to do. Her mom's on life support, and she's talking about like the mental anguish it's taking on her. And just without thinking, he just looks at her and just goes, "Why don't you just unplug her?" And the entire scene just stops. And every time that scene particular just comes on, like I was almost in tears. But I think this film in particular, it just kind of really shows the range of who Paul Giamatti is as an actor. I feel like he's either really dramatic when you go to something like his television work in Billions, or even his cinematic work in Straight Outta Compton, or he has those comedic flares where he does stuff like Private Parts or Big Mama's House or Sideways. But here he really kind of gets to show his full range all in one package, and I think that's really what makes this such a shining moment in his career.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, you could probably guess that the reason this got made was because Paul Giamatti liked the script. And he's he's not, like you said, at the level of Leonardo, but he's a big enough draw that they were able to get it made because Paul wanted to get involved with it. And I love that an actor who's that talented and that fantastic finds this really unique material, which I thought it was an incredible idea, like just a wonderful exploration of our psyche and our soul and who we are as individuals. I love the metaphor about how most of the souls didn't have colors. They were either gray or black. And I thought that was very fitting for the way we look at humanity and society and individuals and how much they struggle and are tortured throughout their lives in a way. I thought it was, I love the double entendre about him being insecure about the size of his soul. It's like, is it always that small? It's like, yeah, no, it's fine. Don't worry. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, it's just as good a soul as the other souls. And like, there's definitely, it's interesting too, though, because, and I have to ask you guys this, because I am not a dark comedy fan. Not that I'm not a fan of it. I have trouble getting it. I always either see things as dark and intense or funny, like my comedies are more, I don't know, something with Will Ferrell in it. And my dark films are more, dark, horror or thrillers or something like that. So, and I didn't find myself laughing very much through this. There was times, that I still really enjoyed it. So I was curious, would you peg it as a dark comedy, or would you just peg it as kind of a dark film with some comedic elements to it?
I think for me, that's the more accurate description of it. I didn't feel very good watching this movie, but I also think that's just the way it was filmed. It's very cold, like literally. I mean, they go to Russia at one point. It's in a very cold location, and yeah, there are comedic parts. But if I were to specify this, I don't think comedy is part of what I would call it.
No, me neither. I definitely think that, Brad, the way that you summed it up, where it's kind of like it's a dark drama that just happens to have comedic moments in it. Another notable moment in this that kind of made me chuckle was when Paul finds out that his soul is being used by Catherine Wick and to do soap operas, and he's like, "Oh, what
Soap operas?
No, they're gonna ruin my soul." Like,
I
that was
thought
so
they were
good.
leading in that she was going to be like a porn star or something, and she needed his soul.
Yeah, me too. I
perform
thought
better.
that they could have done that too. She was even in it. Wasn't she in a nurse's outfit at one point? And you were going, "Wait a second, where is this going?" You know. And there was also a great New York joke. I don't know where you guys are from, but I picked up on it really well. Was they go, "Well, we have a storage facility in New Jersey," and Paul Giamatti goes, "I don't want my soul in New Jersey. Are you kidding me?" I just loved that moment. I was like, okay, I get that. So there was definitely some gems in there as far as from a comedic perspective. But yeah, for sure, most of it felt very dark and an exploration of our inner demons, really, which was fascinating for me.
yeah, that's one of the reasons I think that, when I sat down to watch this movie, I got to the part where he went to Russia, and I texted Dan the trailer. I was like, "Dude, watch this trailer, see if this is something that you would like to do." And that's where Dan, "Oh yeah, my gosh, I'll definitely do this." And then apparently somehow forgot, but it's all good. This movie in particular, there's a podcast that actually chronicles Paul's entire career. Is an academic study, as they like to say. It's a podcast called Giamatti, and they covered this film. And in there, they played a game. What do you think your soul would look like? So, Braden, if you got your soul extracted, what do you think it would look like?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I think it would be really soft, because I tend to be a really, really big empath. I take on the feelings of other people like too much. Like if somebody's going through a hard time, I feel that too, in a lot of ways. So I think it would be very soft. I think it would be, just I don't know about the size. I want to make a joke about the size, but I don't know what to make a joke about. And probably like a gray, because I feel like it can go. I feel like I can be very, just really struggle at times and just be in a really dark place. And then other times I could be a very positive human being and like a very uplifting person and be in a very bright place. And so I'd probably be more in the gray area.
I think mine would probably be more of a darker color, definitely more on the black spectrum. As far as shape, the first thing that comes to mind is like a flower, but not a fully grown flower, like one that is maybe struggling to like cut up through cement, like in the sidewalk. Something that is always in flux and there's always the potential to be more. That's what I think my soul would probably look like. Just like a black, like smallish flower.
I am actually going to pull it back to our previous collaboration, and I would say that mine would be a mini scale of the Lament configuration, because I have a tendency to overcomplicate myself at times, but I also have that gold of, being very bright, like Braden was describing, but also kind of being that was very dark thing. So some days you just never know what you're going to unfortunately get with me, which I'm trying to work on and do myself. But thanks to Giamatti. We'll provide a link in the descriptions where you guys are listening to this to check them out. But let's get into talking about this movie, because this movie has so many, I feel like, good themes to address and talk about, especially from our point of view. And Dan, particularly what you were talking about with the film's narrative, is it describes a fictionalized version of Paul Giamatti that is feeling frustrated in this latest endeavor that he's going through as an actor. And he describes when he goes to the soul clinic, the doctor's like, why do you want to have your soul removed? And he says that I feel stuck. And he's like, he says something along the lines of, I don't want to be happy. I just don't want to suffer anymore. And I think that opens up a great conversation for the implications and dangers, therefore, of, kind of just having temporary happiness in exchange for like a real breakthrough. So like what I mean by that is like placing a metaphor band-aid over the situation in hopes for the same results as, therapy or counseling or, actually talking and addressing the issue would get you. And I kind of wanted just to see also too what you guys kind of thought about how the film handles Paul's kind of intro into the world of soul trafficking.
Yeah, I loved the entire way they talked about the soul, they dealt with the soul. I thought that the opening of the film, where it was just that one shot on Paul while he's on stage trying to perform the scene, was fascinating to me. And how he described it afterwards, that there's like a vice on his chest and it's just twisting, and he's having this problem and he doesn't know what it is, like why he can't get over it. He's obviously going through this really emotional, physical strain that's manifesting itself on stage, and he's suffering from it. And when he gives up his soul, he becomes an actor that can't connect to the material, it seems, and I thought that was really interesting, because I do believe that in order to write darkness, in order to act darkness, in order to perform darkness, like you have to have darkness inside of you to a degree. And I think that's why sometimes the greatest filmmakers and the greatest artists of our time have been plagued by some really bad things mentally. And I don't think you can disconnect the two. I think if you accept genius, you have to accept the torment that might have spurred that genius. And so I found that really fascinating, that in some ways Giamatti's talent was tied to the darkness of his soul and the torture of his soul. And then when he later goes and he tries to get another soul, he gets a Russian poet's soul, and he falls in love with that soul. He almost finds his soulmate in a way, because she's kind of more of it's more of a positive soul. But there's still a longing there. It's almost it's a hopeful longing rather than a negative one. And he utilizes that to perform. And I thought that was really interesting too. And I really love that moment. That moment. I particularly love the end when her soul kind of spoiler alert, disappears, because it felt like it was tapping into the idea of reincarnation, and perhaps that she's moved on now, and been placed into another child. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and Dan and I were talking about this a couple episodes ago in our Rocco's Modern Life episode, that I don't think this podcast, I don't think this organization, I don't think the Victims and Villains as an outlet would exist had, Dan and I in particular have gone through seasons of our own depression and seasons of our own anxiety to, really set this up as a safe haven for people to come and receive help, to come and connect with counselors or resources, and really to be vulnerable and talk about that. And I'm so glad that you brought in that element of the movie where you're seeing so much of Paul's tragedy in the lack of, really not being able to connect to the character, to this fact of, hey, right here, right now, I'm gonna kind of take this out. There's not really a difference when he takes his soul out. He even describes it as empty, kind of borderline bored. There's a scene where he's in this like booth, and they're showing him images and bringing out like a bunny, and he has to like basically convey the fact, are you feeling anything at all? And 2 out of 3 of the tests, he doesn't feel anything at all. And it kind of shows the dangers of where he is, that he doesn't feel like himself until he's connected with that Russian poet. And then even then it's described as too heavy for him. So he needs to kind of reconnect with himself. And sometimes you need to have those journeys away from yourself to kind of rediscover yourself. But again, I don't think that we would have, had we not gone through depression ourselves, you would be listening to this podcast right now.
I mean, it brings up that whole concept of you don't really know what you have until it's gone. I think Paul had the soul that he just took for granted, and he didn't really want to deal with it anymore, just because of how he wasn't connecting in his life and his character. And I think, Josh, I mean, you mentioned boredom. I think when the soul was finally removed, it's just he lacked all passion. And I think that there is an importance that whether you love something or you hate something, what's important is that you're passionate and that you want to connect with people and that you want to get your point across, whether that is through art or through podcasting, or in Paul Giamatti's case, through acting. Which it's worth mentioning. Paul Giamatti, the character's name and the actor are both Paul Giamatti. He is effectively playing himself in this movie, and that just adds a whole extra level of metafictitiousness to it. But it's he acknowledges and realizes that he very quickly and without much thought gave his soul away. And then as we get deeper into the movie, he starts to get really anxious about where it is, who might have it, to the point where he goes on this quest, this hero's journey to find his soul, to get it back, and to try to reclaim what he had lost. And he kind of realizes the momentous responsibility that it means to have a soul, and you can't just give yours away and take on somebody else's. That's going to change who you are as a person, and he wants to get back to how he was, with the lessons that he learned from not having much of a soul.
And that also too comes into the back to the factor of, here you have this guy that's just, he's lost his passion, he's lost his zeal, and he really wants to kind of break it through. And I think that we've published now 384 episodes of this podcast, on countless reviews. We've pushed our resources countless times, and at the end of it, you are in charge of your own mental health. I think that you are in charge of your own happiness, and whether you choose something that is going to be a temporary high or is going to, be a real natural breakthrough for you is really ultimately going to be up to you. And I think that's one of the things that Paul journeys on throughout the course of this film, is really understanding the implications of seeking something so temporary, like I'm just going to live vicariously through this Russian poet for 2 weeks, or I'm going to just give away my soul, and not understanding that it's really a part of myself that I'm giving away. And like you guys were saying earlier, like you don't know what you have until it's gone, and he learns that lesson the hard way. And we kind of get to see that you can't really have an outpouring of emotions without first loving yourself. And that's kind of the journey that he goes on throughout the entire version of this film.
Mm-hmm. The greatest journey is inwards to a degree. And I think that's what he discovers. he spends so much time kind of experiencing these other parts and these other characters, that instead of just saying what am I having trouble with, why am I going through this tough time, he just wants to get rid of the tough time so he can focus on the work. He just wants to extract the thing that's bothering him internally so that he can perform externally, and this is showing how those are tied together, and you can't separate the two, and I really love that, for sure.
I think to a degree that notion also too kind of brings up another danger of escaping inside your work rather than, or another area, instead of actually facing the issue head on. Like there's, we talked about the double entendre of the performance based joke that this film runs, but also, it kind of, there's a reason that you're unhappy in this area of your life. Let's break it down and let's have a conversation. Let's figure out the root and the foundation of why you feel this way, rather than just trying to escape into something like film or work or video games. Let's truly make breakthrough.
I feel like as an actor too, when he has both, when he is lacking a soul and when he takes on someone else's soul, when we see him rehearsing for the Chekhov play, he's able to play that character so differently. And so it's cool to see both Paul, the character in the movie, and Paul, the actor playing the character in the movie. I feel like that was a cool challenge for him in both ways, that based on literally changing the soul that he has, he was able to approach his role in different ways. And I think that that's a challenge and a unique thing that I think a lot of actors like to do, and be able to play multiple parts within the same part is definitely a cool experience.
Absolutely. And I don't think we could commend Paul Giamatti enough for that role. I mean, he's just fantastic in this movie. And one of the reasons that it's so engaging is obviously the script, and the screenwriter did a great job, and the director did a great job, but also Paul's performance. It's really, really amazing to watch. And I'm surprised it like the film, did it have much of a life? I looked it up on IMDb. It didn't seem to get a theatrical release in the US. So I'm just surprised that it didn't get any kind of even Oscar buzz, like to a degree. Like Paul was that good, in my opinion.
So this film in particular is it's funny because I'm blanking on the director's name. I want to say it's Sophia Bartels.
Bartels, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
But so she had this dream one night where she met Woody Allen, and he like had this like jar, and inside of it was a chickpea, and he said that, this is my soul, and she couldn't escape that dream. And so she ran into Paul one night at a film festival in France, because she herself is a French filmmaker. So that's also another reason why this film didn't actually get a international theatrical release.
Gotcha.
But it did circuit around the film festivals. And she pitched him and his wife on this idea of this metaphysical just depiction of who Paul is as an actor, and kind of this whole excursion of what this of like his own like self journey, and they loved it. His wife actually is a producer on this film as well, and thank you for correcting me in the chat. It is Sophia Bartels.
I just looked it up for you. Sophie Bartz, Barthes. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you're good, man. I'd rather say a name right than say it wrong. Yeah. I think too, also to that degree, I feel like this film feels so personal because I feel like there's, who can't relate to that journey of like self-discovery, whether it's, that transition between being like a 12-year-old going into puberty, or a teenager transitioning to adulthood, or, bachelor life or bachelorette life transitioning into marriage, or college into adulthood, or whatever the transition in life is. Like, that journey of self-discovery happens at multiple periods in our lives, and each season of that journey and the differences between all of them yields a different thematic element that, much like Paul, being middle-aged in this movie, he is kind of, rediscovering what it means to be Paul Giamatti.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
I think one of the parts of this movie that felt a little off to me was his marriage and the character of his wife. To me, it didn't feel like she had a purpose just from a writing perspective. Some of the ideas of what he went through and what he wants to do to get his soul back, he was able to bounce off of her. But that could have been done with literally any other character in the movie. And she's not a part of his journey and doesn't really play a major role in the film. And so I don't know. I feel like his wife didn't need to be in the movie. And if she is there, I wish she had more of a substantial part than what we saw her end up doing.
Yeah. I think that they were trying to tap into like this disconnect that they were having, and it might have gone too far, because it felt like there were such a distance between them. And it was interesting because to a degree, I think Paul fell in love with this other soul. And the wife even asked, "Are you cheating on me?" at one point, is there someone else? And so I almost read it as he is out there kind of connecting with other, in a very intimate way with someone else, It is a kind of form of cheating to a degree, right? I mean, a very, very odd and sci-fi version of it, but it's kind of cool to imagine it like that. But yeah, I agree that there was something missing from that relation. I think part of it was purposeful, but I don't know how they could have, accented that better or displayed that better. It's interesting she didn't come in at the end at all, when I think that final scene is a really interesting scene where he meets the Russian woman on the beach. It felt very much like a purgatory, or like they're both lost in some sort of, there's the water visual, which we always think about, like the river Styx or something like that, or catharsis, or if they felt very lost but together, like he had connected with someone else over them both being fragmented in a way. And so I just really liked the film. It was one of those films that made me go, man, I'm not very good at this as a filmmaker. I gotta get better, maybe insecure about my own filmmaking, because I thought that parts of it were just really brilliant.
So you guys got it. This exclusive, his follow-up to What Lies Below is going to be a dark comedy.
That's right.
On the soul social commentary. No, to your point, I think that his arc and Nina's throughout the entire course of the film is that they're always on this trajectory where they're searching for purpose. Like that is their single goal, where Paul is just looking to feel like he matters in this crazy world, and is really trying to not get lost, as he says to the guy at the doctor at the soul storage place, where he's like, I feel like I'm just losing myself, and I can't differentiate between myself and this character, and I really don't want to feel like that anymore. And then Nina is a soul trafficker, where every time that she carries another soul from the US to Russia, she chips off a little bit of herself. So she has this emptiness that's a bit different than Paul's emptiness. And so there's just this trajectory that they're constantly going on, where it's them basically searching for purpose and their value as a human being. But Brad, to your point about the emotional affair and kind of how this journey that Paul goes on really affects him as a husband, I think when you talk about the effects of wanting to, have an affair, we think about it in a physical sense, but it always starts in an emotional sense. There's definitely some marriages that I've known, unfortunately, that have kind of fallen apart because of emotional affairs that have taken place. And so those things, really also too, it really do also 9 times out of 10 manifest into something physical, and they take you out of the relationship that you're currently in. And we kind of see Paul and his wife go on that journey.
Yeah. I'd be more pissed. I mean, if it was me, I'd be more upset about, an emotional cheating rather than a physical cheating. Like I think, the physical is just lust, like whatever, get it out of your system, right? Like, but emotional, when you actually connect to someone and you talk to someone and you see their soul in this case, that is supposed to be something that's reserved for the ones you truly love. And so that's I thought it was a really interesting moment about when she asked that.
Yeah, I think that when you have, we have that connection between someone that, especially someone you're committed to when you're together for as long as they were, there are implications of those things that come up, and it's so hard to predict anything. But I know that when they're giving their wedding vows, I'm sure Paul didn't realize, well, one day I'll put my soul into storage, and then we'll see what happens there. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I think that when we look at both the allure and the dangers of this temporary happiness, right, of what Paul is seeking in the short term, really for this play. A play is not something that would go on forever, so he really is seeking this short-term solution, and we can see the ramifications of that throughout the course of the film. But when you are able And this is a great allegory, I think we mentioned for like therapy as well. When you try to go for that low hanging fruit and those short like comfort food type treatments, it's just not going to be as impactful as those longer, more meaningful breakthroughs of what you go through. And so this is where it's a great metaphor for just, I think, accepting and being happy with who you are, and also playing things to your strengths. That's something that I've been trying to practice and do in my own life. I have some things that I think I'm pretty good at, and I have things that I'm not very good at. I'm not a great basketball player. I'm not going to do that professionally. I've accepted that. I know that. Football, on the other hand, that's still on the table. Never played a game in my life, but maybe someday I could. But it's understanding, and if you guys remember the show Third Rock from the Sun, great show. John Lithgow is on it. He has a quote in one of the early seasons where he says, "In life there are happy people and there are successful people, and the successful people have learned how to use their strengths, but the happy people have learned how to accept their flaws." And I think that is something that if Paul was able to do and put the work in to connect with his role and with his life without changing souls, that would be much better in the long term, because he put the work and took the effort to put that in, as opposed to a procedure that was kind of done passively to him, and then he just experiences the side effects after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree, and one of the things that I think that I know we touched on this before, but I think it is important to when you're going on, like when you're trying to improve your life to a degree, or be a more positive person, be a person who can connect to others, connect to material, whatever it is. It is important to look inwards, and also one of the things that he does is he changes perspectives, right? Because he has this other soul. He all of a sudden sees the world in a different way. And as hard as things can be for all of us, and we go through these tough times, like I sometimes find the best way to evolve or to do better personally is to take a moment and learn someone else's perspective, or experience someone else's perspective, or take a look at my own beliefs and prejudices and thoughts, and say, what's going on here, what's wrong, like what can I change, should I change, and that's a tough thing to do. Like, a lot of people don't do that, and you can see Paul's resistance to that throughout the movie. He doesn't want to pinpoint the problem, go inwards. He wants to just extract it and move on. And I thought that was really a great metaphor for dealing with, personal trauma, personal issues, mental issues. A lot of us, and it's also the mentality that you're always taught is just, things will get better, just move on, put a smile on, walk out the door, everything will be fine. But really, sometimes you have to sit with those thoughts and really explore them and go and talk them out, and try to evaluate them or understand where they're coming from in order to overcome them. And ignoring them or just trying to get rid of them with some sort of impulsive happiness, or momentary happiness is actually kind of the wrong thing to do, in my opinion. Maybe
it seems right in that moment, and then once that high is over, that problem still exists. It's like now I've talked about this before on here. The reason that
ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream. The reason that I am not a real heavy drinker is because I know that if I'm going to get drunk or get high simply to escape my problems, well, once I become sober again, those problems are still there. I still have to deal with them. And I love the line that Dr. Flintstein says after Paul gets his soul extracted. He says, how can such a little thing be so heavy? And
That's a great line, yeah.
That's such a great line for mental health as well, because mental health is something that every one of us carry, and it doesn't, it's such a tiny thing, but it's also such a heavy thing as well. And there are days where, your depression, your anxiety, your suicidal tendencies, or your addictive traits can really weigh in and really make you feel heavier as an individual. And chasing that temporary happiness, it's not going to do anything for you in the long run. Like I said, it's a great band-aid for that moment, but we need to understand that true breakthrough comes through real work. It comes through getting down dirty, getting vulnerable. And I think that all three of us on this call right now can attest to, kind of being a man and what the societal expectations are for manhood and for mental health. It's, buck up, move on, like you were saying, Brad. And we don't ever really get the chance to just kind of be, able to just to unwind or to decompress, because we have to, always be moving. We always have to be this like strong man. And in reality, that's how broken men are created.
Yeah, having to live up to a certain expectation or a pressure of how a person is meant to be or viewed, it just adds a lot of unnecessary pressure. I think we, just as humans, the way we're designed is we're going to be putting so much pressure on ourselves. Any outside pressure in addition to that is not something that's needed. And Paul Giamatti does a good job of showcasing just this journey that he takes of being under this stress and this pressure and not being satisfied with his own life, and trying to find ways to fix it. But there are no quick or easy fixes. And I think he realizes that, especially toward the end of the film, when he literally goes to Russia to figure out where his soul is and how he can get it back. And it's this weight that he carries around with him, and without it, he might not have the weight anymore, but he loses so much. And Josh, I'll ask you, I know you're a pretty spiritual person. When you think of the soul, what does that mean to you? If you were to lose your soul, what do you feel you would be missing if that were to happen?
I think that, to draw from another piece of pop culture, not to get too philosophical, the episode of The Simpsons where Bart sells his soul, and Lisa is, kind of, telling him about, the soul is basically like your gateway almost kind of to identity, for, it's kind of a big portion of what makes you you. That is kind of the way that I view the soul in terms. The soul's definitely a tricky subject to talk about, and I don't also feel qualified to talk about it, because if I'm honest, it's never been a huge part in my own self-discovery. I think that I've just also kind of slid into those societal expectations for what a soul is, and be like, all right, soul is something I need in order to function as a human being. That's why, we see in so much pop culture, when you see in horror movies or, darker films, you often have a protagonist call an antagonist soulless and dark, or, I think the soul is kind of what really allows you to have light in darker situations. It's what allows you to have hope.
You just reminded me with the Bart Simpson that when I was in probably middle school, I had a friend who wrote on a piece of paper, "Whoever owns this owns my soul," and put it up for sale on eBay. And I think he sold it for like $5. So I I just pictured the devil notoriously makes deals and steals souls. I just picture him like browsing the internet one day and be like, no way, it can't be this easy. Buy. Oh, okay, cool. I have it now. But I'm just so curious. One, who purchased it, and two, I don't know what that. And that's where I thought going into this movie, I'm like, this has to be a figurative thing of, okay, we'll take your soul. Like, you don't have to worry about it. We'll take it. We'll take care of it. And then he gets this chickpea thing extracted from him, which we are not shown really the specifics of how that procedure works. I'm so curious. Where are they sucking the soul out from? Is there an incision that needs to be made? Are they amassing energy that then forms into that solid piece? We just don't really know. But I agree with you, Josh. I mean, I've met people who genuinely don't believe the soul exists. I'm not one of them. I think that there's something to be said for a sentient being and being aware of not only our own mortality on this planet, but being able to think about everything that the arts are about, from love and lust to fear, and anxiety, and being able to translate that and get that across different mediums. I think there needs to be something more than just the electrical signals in the brain, and to me, that is what would make up the soul. Not a lot of movies seem to deal with this philosophically, it feels like, and so I like that that this film goes into it and does it in such a unique way. It would be one thing to say, okay, we're going to manifest the soul and we're going to make it be this physical thing that you can see, but to do it in the context of like a glorified storage unit of we'll just take it and we'll keep it. And then I love by the end of the film, they get bought out by a hedge fund, right? And then they start trying to value the price, the market price of these souls. And it's just like, well, of course that would happen. This is capitalism. Why wouldn't it? But it's funny looking at the regulation or the non-regulation of this industry with how young it is and how like the government hasn't quite caught up to figure out what to do with them yet. So there's a lot of like just little funny like weird real world nuances that they put into this that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think too, talking about the soul in particular, I think that if media does portray it, it's oftentimes going to be this very over exaggerated, oftentimes humorous level of I'm selling my soul to the devil, or whatever have you, because we're just, that's just where we are. And I think that the soul, much like mental health, is something that is either uncomfortable to talk about or is just something that we, for whatever reason, think, it doesn't exist, or, that it's purposeless. It doesn't have any real say or anything that, it needs to go on. And I think that's why this film, for as weird as it is subtly an important film, because it begs the viewer to look inward and really question their own humanity and really why, how they view their soul, or how they view mental health, or how they view their own purpose and value as an individual. And this film does such a good job at that. And I'm gonna let Braden speak real quick, just in case he wants to add anything. But I did have something that I wanted to add as far as just kind of where this film's last act really pulls from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I consider myself, just to go back to your original question, Dan, I don't know if I really consider myself a spiritual person necessarily, or not. But the way I read the film, the way I interpreted it, was that the soul was kind of equivalent to our unconscious, the recesses of our psyche, which is sometimes caused by some deep-seated trauma or something from our childhood. I thought there was a lot of things about infancy and being a newborn and a child that kind of kept coming into play. And there was also some things on the other side of the spectrum about death and aging every time he would go into that dream state. And I think that's, and so for me, it read like, the unconscious, those parts of our mind that are either created from just naturally from humanity or from some experience that we go through when we're a little kid. I mean, I would be curious to see how you guys read the last bit of the film, because I do think it's not, I wouldn't call it open-ended, but I do think that you could interpret it in some unique ways. And I think that the director was looking for you to do that in their own way, which I always love. When someone is bold enough to say, well, here's, I'm going to do this, but you could also say something else about it, if you prefer. And I'm fine with that. And I think that's great art, so I'd be curious to hear you guys' thoughts on the ending specifically.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I feel like as an audience member, I don't love open-ended endings as much as maybe filmmakers do, because I think there is something nice for the audience to take something away. However, I do think it makes for better conversation. I don't want to spoil this movie, even though it's over 10 years old, but Inception has a very famously open-ended ending. And I think that there is evidence to support one way or another of how you feel that movie ends. However, I do agree that if the movie just ended definitively and that was it, it's very likely people wouldn't still be talking about it. But the fact that there is that lingering question, it still brings that conversation up for people even years later. So I think as a conversation piece and helping to get people more involved and more passionate, having endings like that can be helpful. With this movie, I found myself feeling a little confused, a little uncertain of what this was trying to imply, if it's meant to be a happy ending, or if we're to believe that that the soul fractures that are within herself from all of the soul smuggling she was doing, how detrimental that is, and will it affect her lifespan, and if so, how poorly will it be? So there are a lot of unanswered questions that I want the DLC for this film, man. I want to know what else there is to see, and what happens next. That's what I'm really curious about.
I've seen this movie twice, and I have not really considered the open-ended nature of this question, but it does kind of read into the last point that Brad, I'm glad that you brought up, because I think that the last thing I really wanted to talk about in this episode is the journey that Paul kind of goes on finding out about Olga. Yeah. She is the Russian poet who soul he gets, and he says that, she's very beautiful. And the open ending for this film is basically Paul and Nina on a beach, and it just kind of, they're looking out at the sunset. But for Paul, he kind of, once he discovers that she has committed suicide, and for him it is this journey of rediscovering himself, but also remembering and honor someone that he got a chance to be very intimate with, even no matter how briefly, but also honoring those that we've lost to suicide. And I've talked about it in the past before, like, this whole show and an organization exists because I lost someone to suicide, and this is my way of kind of preventing others from feeling that pain of losing someone to suicide, but bringing awareness to it, but also at the same time also allowing those that have experienced the death of suicide and lost others to it, is to kind of honor their memory, and let people know that are currently going through it, that they're not alone. And I think that that's kind of the journey that Paul goes through, because from someone that's lost someone to suicide, it is a indescribable feeling. You just feel complete and helplessness. And I think that this film, once Paul finds out that way, it makes the open ending of this film that much more heavy, and that much more real, compared to a lot of the other things that they end up talking about, as far as Nina trying to get a soul and him trying to get the soul back, and the whole hedge fund thing, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I always found it kind of like, anytime somebody tells me, like, for those who have lost people, I've lost someone very close to me as well. It wasn't from suicide, but it was from a very unexpected death. They were only 40 years old. And there's a lot of people that'll come up to you and they'll say, it'll get better, or, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And I always feel like those people haven't really lost anyone, when they say stuff like that, because it doesn't go away. It's always there. You just learn how to deal with it a little better, and at any given moment you could see something or touch something or be reminded of something, and it could set you off, as a reminder of that person, a reminder of who you lost. And I thought that was very, like, that ties into the ending of, I really think that my reading of it was that Paul Giamatti really made a connection to this other soul. He found in a lot of ways his soulmate, his match, the person that complemented him. And when that was extracted and it was replaced with his own soul, I feel like he felt very lost. Like, again, like he felt there was something missing. And then you go to Nina, who has all these fragments of all these other souls in her, because there's always 5% left. Every time you remove a soul, 5% stays in you. So she has all these fragments of all these people's souls with no identity of her own, really. I think that she feels the same way. And so I kind of read it as this really purgatory, lost in translation situation where, it was a little bit depressing, to be honest with you. Like, I don't consider it an uplifting ending in a lot of ways. Even though he was able to get his soul back, he was able to go internally. I still feel he's not necessarily evolved. In a lot of ways, there's still something lacking for him. But maybe Nina can fill that gap.
Yeah, and that's really he ends up making this connection, and it's kind of inferred that it might be like a sexual connection or an attraction, but it's never kind of really alluded to. I think there's just something in humanity that Paul is just wanting to connect with, and he ends up finding that connection in Nina. Just because of that purposelessness that she feels. I think that the two, they kind of find each other in their own emptiness, and I think subsequently Paul is looking for that. I think that there's a reason that it gets the film gets to a point where it's no longer addressing the marriage of Paul. It's kind of the relationship that him and Nina have, and you know in a ways, I do see where you're coming from, like that he doesn't really grow. Like he's had this experience, and really hasn't grown from that experience. And I think that films like this kind of place our own humanity and our own mortality into perspective, because they challenge us to grow. Because a lot of the times that you're not going to have those Disney endings where everything comes out peachy keen and everything's good to go. And so I think that this film leaves the audiences with a lot to consider and a lot to ponder. And it's a very artistically driven film, and that's very layered. And I think it's one of the things that makes it such a near mint masterpiece of cinema.
I agree. I mean, there's I feel like there's a lot to break down and a lot to enjoy about this movie, and the fact that I feel like the fact that I had never even heard of it, despite it having a pretty prominent cast and it being as prolific as it is, I wish more people knew about this movie. Hopefully, us talking about it will encourage more people to go check it out, because it's not often I see a movie where I can say, like, that's something I've never seen before. This movie had some stuff I've never seen before. I've never seen someone's soul be extracted and then put into a physical manifestation of a chickpea. That is new to me. So it does a lot of really cool things, and I love the mental health elements that it has, and that I think there are some good lessons that can be taken away here from it.
It reminded me a little bit. I think the closest comparable I can give is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where they were going in and trying to extract memories rather than souls. But in a lot of ways, the way they were talking about the soul, I felt that it was similar to those deep-seated memories that change us, that really create who we are as individuals. Especially with the dream sequences that they had at the end, you could tell that their souls were filled with these really repressed things in their unconscious, and so that's probably the closest thing I can think of as like a comparable of the idea. But yeah, I do agree. I thought it was so unique in that way.
Absolutely. Josh, do you have any closing thoughts for us about this film?
This is a film that I think it's not necessarily a uplifting film. I think this is one of those films that's important to check out because not only, like Dan said, for its predominant cast, not only for the themes that we've spent the entire last hour talking about, but the fact that just this film, even from a cinematography standpoint and also settings, it's a very cold, isolated film. But I think that films like this definitely challenge our own notions of what it means to be human. And I think this film does a great job at placing that into perspective. So I just want to go ahead and say to go check out this movie, Cold Souls. It is I feel like we've done a good job pretty much staying as spoiler free as you can get. But this is now available, like I said at the beginning of the show. You guys can check it out on Hoopla and Canopy, just with the library card. Also, too, and I just want to plug this one more time, you guys. If you guys have Netflix, please go check out Braden's film, What Lies Below. But where can people find you online, sir?
Yeah, it's available on Netflix, and I know that it's it's rentable too if you don't have Netflix on VOD streaming. So if you want to rent it on Vudu or Amazon Prime or anything like that, you still can. I think that's the way to get it internationally. And I believe that the DVD is coming out on Amazon in like a couple weeks. It might have the director, my commentary on it, which was a lot of fun. I did it with Jimmy Liu, the cinematographer, and he's like my brother from another mother. So we had a good time doing that. And I think there's some other things in that DVD that people can check out that should be fun. And then my last thought on Cold Souls is just, it feels like one of those films you probably should see twice too. I kind of want to see it again because I really want to get into the psychology of it, and I really found it fascinating. It's definitely a slower paced film. You have to have your energy going into it. You can't watch it at 11 o'clock at night expecting to stay awake the whole time. But when you get into the weeds of it, the details of it, it's really a fascinating film, and I commend the filmmakers and everyone who was involved because we need more films like that. We need more films that make people think and look at themselves in a good way. Try to make us better people.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what from someone that has seen it twice. I keep a Letterboxd account list of all the first viewings I've made this year. I've seen 92 new movies this year that are not set in this year, and Cold Souls sits at number 17 right now. This film is incredible.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. Dan, where can people find you online, sir?
You can find me over on Twitter at drock64. Promise to be more active there. I just rolled credits on Resident Evil Village on PS5, so I was off to avoid spoilers, but that's no longer a worry. So catch me over there for a lot of video game stuff, some political commentary, and whatever else I feel like retweeting at the time.
Awesome.
And you guys can follow me once again on Letterboxd. I am at Captain Nostalgia, and you guys can follow us everywhere at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. You guys can go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find links to all of those, and including past episodes that we have done of our flagship episode, our spin-off podcast, That's High Praise, a Nicolas Cage podcast. Get connected to our Patreon, movie reviews, and most importantly, our mental health prevention resources. Brad, thank you so much for taking a journey into the Cold Soul machine to talk about the Paul Giamatti movie, Cold Souls.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It was great being here. I had an awesome time, and loved chatting it up with you about a very interesting film.
Oh, yeah. Always a pleasure.
You guys can sneak into the Soul Machine because we will be back on another episode in the future.